Hey up everybody, welcome back to the Audio Cycling YouTube channel, where today I'm going to be doing a preview of the Volta Catalunya. There have been a couple of changes to the start list and I've been waiting for it to be fully complete before making this video, so that's why it's up a little bit later. There won't be a podcast version with the other guys for this one just because I won't be able to get it out soon enough. Firstly, let's take a look at the stage profiles. We've got stage 1, which is the very typical stage 1 finish of Volta Catalunya. We've seen Michael Matthews win here, we saw Remco win here last year as well. Very puncher finish. But you get a kind of a mix of climbers and punchers and sprinters. It's a really weird one. Stage 2 up to Volta 2000, big mountaintop finish. We know how that's going to go. Very similarly on Port Agny. You could say this is probably a harder stage with the multitude of climbing in here. It's going to be a big test for Poggy more than likely. So another hilltop finish. Stage 4 is the most certain kind of pure sprint that we've got in this race for the pure sprinters who do come here, of which there aren't many. Stage 5 I think could be a breakaway or it could be another sprint. The downhill finish does favour the breakaway for sure, but I think there's probably quite a few teams who'll be interested in keeping this as a sprint. Stage 6 we've got another hilltop finish, so another GC day, and then stage 7 with the circuit around Barcelona generally ends up being a GC day, but there's also the possibility that sometimes a breakaway can make it. Think back to when Mohoric and Ghent did that. So generally you see, it's more of like a GC style of day. Pogacar is the most expensive rider at 28, and to be honest with you, I think I feel like you still need to be picking him. I think, could he be winning 3, 4, 5 stages of this race? Winning GC, barring anything catastrophic, yeah. So he could be getting northwards of 1,000 points. So I think that Pogacar is sort of a must-have for your team. Generally, a good rule of thumb to follow with VELOGAMES is that if Pogacar is available, then pick him, because he is just a high scorer. Almeida, on the other hand, as the second leader for UE, isn't that great, even though the terrain does suit him a bit more because there's less downhills and more just kind of longer hilltop finishes, which is great for him. But just under the kind of the wing of Pogacar, I don't rate it too much. Generally, just second leaders aren't a great choice to be going with. Yates, you do find that with these second most expensive riders, that they're just not worth it. I mean, Roglic was a great example of that at Paris-Nice, and I still picked him. But Yates, I don't know. He's had a decent history of this race, but picking Pogacar and him does kind of limit your team a little bit. So I'm not looking at him too favourably. I would rather pick somebody who's a bit cheaper, but saying that, Yates is a really fantastic rider, and it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up on the podium. I think going with him is a massive, it's not a massive risk, but it is a risk, but it's certainly one that could pay off massively if you're needing to gain some ground in the Stage Race Championship. But I would rather go with Vlasov, personally. He was on the upward curve, I believe, at the end of Paris-Nice. We saw him looking really strong. And I think he's going to carry that into Catalunya. I think he's a serious threat for the podium. I think he's quite fast in a sprint amongst the GC candidates, so that's quite helpful too. So I think that Vlasov's a really good one. Kuss, bit of a weird one. I'm never quite sure what to expect from him. There are some high altitude finishes, which is great for him. But we also have Brooks, and I'm just not sure which one they'll end up going with. So that's why I'm not quite certain of either of these guys. I'd much rather pick somebody who's a pure leader, but I think there's definitely an argument that one of these guys will be finishing inside the top 10, if not maybe the top 5. So I think that they are decent choices, but they are just a little bit risky because they're like co-leaders. Landa, on the other hand, I mean, speaking of people with co-leaders, Soudal Quickstep have so many climbers in this race. Landa's just one of them, alongside Van Wilder, who we'll get onto in a minute. I think Landa's a very good differential. I don't see a lot of people picking him, but he did finish, I want to say it was like 5th or 6th place in this race last year in GC. So I think that he is a good choice. And without Remco here, I see Landa being another kind of strong candidate to try and get a top 5. He was decent in Algarve. There's no TT, so that's a big help to him. And I just think that this race suits Landa quite a lot this year. So this is one of the few opportunities where I would realistically pick Landa. It's not very often that I say that. Mas, on the other hand, I just don't pick unless it's a Grand Tour. For some reason, he just doesn't do well in VELOGAMES outside of the Grand Tours. So I'd stay away from Mas. Brooks I've just talked about a little bit before. He was 7th in Tirreno, behind Jonas. And, he was fine there. He'll probably be in the top 10, but I just think there's better value a little bit further down. Somebody like Bernal, personally, if he does the same that he did at Paris-Nice, he'll be a fantastic pick. He got like 500 points there. So if he does exactly the same, that'll be brilliant. And I actually think the terrain suits him more. He's been on a really good kind of comeback, you could say, this year. And I think this is just another step towards him being competitive again. So I'm a big fan of Bernal for this race. I certainly think that he's a top 10 candidate. And I look forward to seeing his next step in his kind of comeback story. Higuita, I think he'll be working for Vlasov. He might get a couple of opportunities to himself, but generally not worth it, considering that he's a domestique essentially. I think that Martinez, for me, is the best 12 credit rider. You could say that Bernal is as well. I think it's pretty close. Martinez has just been fantastic so far this year. You look at his results. He's very consistent. He was very good at Stlardi. I'm no TT here. I think that Martinez is almost a certainty to go into people's teams. He's just been so sensational. The climbs really suit him, being a lighter rider on the longer climbs. And yeah, I just think that he's really good. Nairo, geez, I don't even know what to make of Nairo, because he hasn't even been on the radar for the last year. Considering how he looked at Tour Colombia, I'm going to say no, but he has done well in this race in the past. So I don't think you can ever really count him out. But I would say that Bernal and Martinez would be better choices. Sivakov is just a domestique, so don't go with him. So is Vine. Van Hil's very good at San Remo, very good at Stlardi, and therefore he is a good choice for this race. Very good for stage 1 and the last stage on stage 7. But his problem comes is that he's probably not going to be climbing with the best, so therefore he's not going to do that great of a GC, and therefore it just makes the Bernals and Martinez's far more appealing, because yes, he might beat them on stage 1, but there's so many GC days, like 3 or 4, that I just think that Martinez and Bernal are just going to be better options. But if you like Van Hills, then by all means go with him. He will probably score you 250, maybe 300 points. 10 credit riders, none of them are particularly tempting to me, in all honesty. Cockard possibly as quite a versatile sprinter, but he hasn't looked great so far this year. Hater, I don't really pick him unless it's the Tour of Romandy, because for some reason he's far too risky. I know he's always so tempting for us all to pick, because we all think back to the sensational Tour of Romandy performances that he's done, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not willing to risk that, to be honest with you. Not again. I've been bitten far too many times by Ethan Hayter, and I'm not going to be played for a fool again. Tobias Harland Johannesson, he's coming back from an injury from the Tour Alps Maritime, so watch out for that. But in theory, if he is flying and he's all good, no injuries, then he's certainly a top 10 candidate, and he's quite fast in a finish, so a good one for like stage 1 and stage 7 once more. Martin will probably be like top 15, very similarly for Rodriguez. Rubio could actually be the best option for Movistar, with question marks over Nairo and Enric Mas. Rubio was also in that front group at Milano Torino. Well, the second group, because Bettiol won, but you know what I mean. Rubio's pretty decent, no TTs, big upside for him there. And I think he's a pretty solid one for maybe scraping into the top 10. Soler's a domestique. Ivan Garcia, never pick him. Just never do that. Vandenberg, good at 10, considering the free sprints he might do. So that's certainly worthwhile pointing out. Van Wilder at 10, pretty undervalued, in my opinion, considering that he is really good. And I don't think his Paris-Nice performance was reflective of his abilities. He was working for Remco there. The no TTs doesn't help him, I will admit. But I think that at 10 credits, he's probably the safest one for me, alongside probably Vandenberg and Cockard as the sprinting types. Mike Woods, I never know what to expect from, and quite frankly, Israel have far too many leaders in this race where I'm not willing to bank on any of them, to be honest. 8 credit riders, I always think back to that 2021 Tour of Volta Catalunya, where Esteban Chavez won a stage and came 7th in GC. It's very possible that he could do that again. He did that performance off of no previous results, so I can never quite count Chavez out for the Volta Catalunya. But recent results don't certainly look at him too favourably. But he's worthwhile shouting out nonetheless. Laurens de Plus might do well just as a domestique deluxe. Very similarly for Harper, who was quite good in Paris-Nice. You could also go for like Jesus Herrada as a bit of a puncher, he's kind of like Van Hills, I guess, but a little bit cheaper. Hurt and Knox, Soudal Quickstep do say that they're going to let their riders into the breakaways. I just don't know which one it's going to be. Their style list is just a bit too good, and so it's a little bit hit and miss. Kron hasn't raced so far this year. Van Hills is probably the safer option of the two, so I'm not certain about Kron getting his own opportunities. Liepins is the sprinter for DSM, they say. Not Bittner, but I'll wait and see. Arne Mallet is going to be the sprinter for Intermarché if he can make it over the climbs. That's an important thing to remember. Wout Poels is the leader for Bahrain Victorious, and at 8 credits, that's incredible value for money. So I think that Wout Poels is the safest 8 credit rider to be going with. Riccatello, good at UAE Tour. Was he going to do anything here? Maybe he might scrape a top 10, but Poels is a safer bet, considering that he has just done Tirreno, where he looked pretty good. They also say that Taberi, they're looking to try get a top 10 as well. He's like a second leader, I guess you could say. So another one, if you want to put the cat killer on, then by all means go with that. 6 credit riders, Des Bittner. They say they're sprinting for Liepins, but honestly, he hasn't looked so good this year. Bittner might be a safer bet for them. An important update is that Caden Groves isn't in this race, which means that Lars Boven of Alpecin de Koenig could be a good option, but there's also, a little bit further down, there's Axel Laurence. So I'm not sure who they're sprinting for, because Alpecin de Koenig don't do press releases. So one of those is going to be a good choice. It's just really up to you to decide. I'd say that Boven is faster on a flat sprint and that Laurence is better on an uphill kicker. So on balance, that favours Boven, I guess, but I think that Laurence is the much better pick for stage 1. Bassato, like I said, Marit is the fastest sprinter on their team, but Bassato is better at climbing, and he's pretty fast in a sprint as well. So I think that he's a really good one where Marit probably gets dropped, and Bassato could certainly pick up a few top 10s. This is De Gent's last Volta Catalunya, so if you're feeling nostalgic, go for him. He does say that he wants to try and win a stage from the breakaway in this race, so expect him to be launching it into the break loads. So that might actually end up being quite a good choice. Fortunato, he was 11th in Tirreno Adriatico recently, so he could come top 15 in this race, realistically. How many points does that get you? Probably somewhere between 100 to 150, depending on how well he does in each of the stages. Maybe towards 200 if he's really good. So that's not too bad and quite safe. It's safer to go with the GC options, I think. Ivan Garcia Cortina, good sprinter for Movistar. There are a couple of sprinters in here who are quite good. Godon is another one. These guys, they could compete in 3 stages, or they might only compete in like 1. So that's a little bit of a gamble. It really depends on how they're climbing. Coolset was 9th in GC, 8th in GC to be a Tour of Oman. But they do have Tobias Haaland Johannesson here. But like I said earlier, he coming back from injury. So Coolset could be a good little differential. Axel Laurence, as I mentioned, very good for stage 1. But is he going to do good on the kind of flat sprints? I don't know. I'd favour Boven for those. So that's a little bit tricky. William Junior Leclerc, obviously very good at the Alula Tour, but this isn't the Alula Tour. This is the Volta Catalunya, and he has Ilan van Wilder and Mikel Landa and Jan Hurt and loads of other riders on this team who could be ahead of him. So that's a risk, but he is a cool risk. Valentin Padipentela, good leader for Decathlon, very cheap. His UAE Tour, he was working for O'Connor, so therefore I think he could be, again, a top 15 candidate in this race. Quinn maybe, but there's Vandenberg. But if Vandenberg is dropped, like he has been recently, then Quinn could certainly get his own opportunities. Ida Schelling was very good in this race last year, got 2 third places. Maybe he could do it again. He's been having a very similar sort of build-up to this race. So therefore Schelling is quite a good one to be going with, but a little bit risky because he might also just get dropped hard. Turn seems very cheap at 6, but he hasn't looked great so far this year. However, coming towards the time of season where Dylan Turn should be doing quite well, it's certainly worthwhile maybe throwing a bit of a risk on him, because he's a Grand Tour stage winner, for goodness sake. He's won a stage of a tour. This seems quite cheap for him. And Verona, I think, is the last 6 credit rider I really like, just because he was good at UAE Tour, and Lidl-Trek don't have anybody like Theo Gegenhardt or anybody here. 4 credit riders if you need them. Baudin was good early this year, and because they only have Valentin Panepentler, I think he could get his own opportunities here as well. Berardi is kind of fast for Bahrain, so maybe he gets his own opportunities to try and get some top 10s in some of the sprints. Yeah, other than that, probably Novak is the best. Just get the assist points and just bank the assist points and just get on with your life. Rafferty, I quite like as well, but like I said earlier, there's Sean Quinn and there's Mane van den Berg, so I don't know how much opportunity he's going to get in this race. This is my team, because I realise this video is probably quite long. I've gone very GC heavy. Only Bassato really being the only sort of sprinter, I guess you could say. I could swap out Panepentler and go with somebody like Ivan Garcia Cortina or Godon or Schelling for a bit more of a sprinting edge. However, the point scoring system just seems to really favour the GC guys, so this is what I'm going with at the moment. I'm really happy with it, actually. I've only changed this team once. Previously I had Landa in here, and then Pools I just had a 6 credit rider. That's what I had, but I've swapped it for Bernal and Poles because I saw that Bahrain are going with Poles as their leader. But let me know what you're thinking in the comments section down below in terms of who you're going to be selecting for your teams. I think this is quite an easy competition to make a team which is very satisfactory. I don't think you need to really compromise a lot because there's quite a lot of good options in the 6s and 4s. So be sure to put your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. And all that is left to say is to stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next video. Salut.